Yeah. Speaking of getting things under control, Echo.
Yeah.
Maybe could you tell people quickly how they could support this podcast?
I'll try to make it. I kind of feel like we should keep talking about what we've been talking about.
I hear you.
Actually, I have a question. 2 questions.
Okay.
Actually. So with the recent kind of
this
rise.
This is what everyone waits for in the podcast. Echo's questions.
A little bit more. With the rise of your exposure, we'll call it, do people kind of flock to your class now?
Well,
university?
No, not so much to my class, but they're definitely flocking to public talks.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so, and my class has generally been quite popular, so that's, and...
Makes sense.
Yeah, and I'm on sabbatical this year, so we'll see what happens when I return.
Was that luck, or did you pre-coordinate that?
Well, it was actually the good grace of the university, because I had to get my act back together after all these things happened, and I've also had some health problems over the last year that have been rather severe, which I think I have under control, maybe. But I told them that, look, I'm going to be much better if I take this year and do what's necessary for this book that's coming out and reconceptualize what I'm going to be teaching. Because the other thing is I have to do that. I've got all these lectures recorded now. Mm-hmm. They're on YouTube. It's like, it isn't obvious to me why I should do them again. I've done, there's 3 years of some of them online. So I have to rethink what I'm doing as a university lecturer. Because with YouTube, you can do something new, like this biblical series that I've been doing. You can do something new and you can have it out in front of 150,000 people in one day. Mm-hmm. It's like, well, you got to think about that. That's a whole different universe. Mm-hmm. And I like doing lectures on things that I'm still learning about. It's hard to do that at a university because you have to have the evaluation structure. People have to know what to expect. Mm-hmm. And, it has to be pre-planned. Mm-hmm. And that's not so good if you want to do something that's novel. So I've got a lot of thinking about that, and I don't know what's going to happen this next year in any case. So.
Did you find that like let's say you did a talk about something specific and people saw it online? I think a lot of times people are more compelled to see that same one in person, like a concert. Oh yeah, I listened to, I don't know, ZZ Top. And, I have the CD or whatever, but they're in town for a concert, or they're, in the next state for a concert. I want to go see the concert.
Well, I think that works out okay for me because there are these underlying themes that permeate everything that I'm saying. And I would say those are the archetypal themes. So I have this sort of structured way of presenting information that's based on, the work I did for Maps of Meaning. And so even if the lecture's new, there's echoes of the other ones always. Yeah. I mean, one of the things about archetypal stories and images is that they're very expansive, and so they're multifaceted. And so you end up touching on the same themes over and over, but from different perspectives. Yeah. And one of the things people tell me all the time, which is really interesting, and this has really been the case for 30 years, is they come up to me after the lecture and they say, you were telling me things that I already knew, but I didn't know I knew them. Yeah. And that's definitely an archetypal experience because, your experience does have a certain structure. And that doesn't mean you can say what it is. But if you hear it being said, then you know that that's what it is. Yeah. And so it's fun in front of a crowd because I can watch that happen to people. Because I'm always speaking to individuals within the crowd, and I'll say something and someone will go like this. Their eyes are open a little bit, or they'll jerk back a little bit, and I think, yes, so that just clicked a couple of things together for you, which is really, it's fun.
I get the same thing. So with Extreme Ownership, the book, and it's about leadership principles. And we say in the book, these are not new. These have been around for hundreds and in some cases thousands of years of how militaries run organizations, and therefore the military leadership principles are actually the same as all leadership principles because you're trying to get a bunch of crazy human beings to do something that's going to behind a mission and execute it in the most efficient way. But people say, I kind of do. I always thought that I should do that. I've always done that.
Yeah.
But you captured it.
Yeah.
And it's a self-awareness, I think, when people maybe they do have good natural leadership judgment. And they've always taken responsibility for things, but they never really thought about it. They just kind of did it. Well, then once they know, hey, I need to take ownership of things, well, then they really can do it.
Yeah.
And they also see it in their subordinate leadership, and they go, that guy's not taking ownership of things. They're not doing a good job. And it's the same thing with keeping things simple or decentralized command or prioritize and execute. These are things that successful leaders do. Prioritize and execute. If you get a leader that's going to try and accomplish 37 different things at the same time, they're not going to be successful. So leaders, they know to prioritize and execute. Good leaders. But when we say it to them, they might not do 37 things, but they might try and do 8 things at the same time. And they know that they should be doing 1 or 2. Mm-hmm. And when they hear us say it and describe it, they go, yeah, that's exactly right.
One of the things that characterizes a leader is that he or she knows where they're going. Right. I mean, that's the fundamental print. Now, you have to be able to communicate it too, but I worked for a UN committee at one point on economic sustainability, economic and environmental sustainability. And one of the problems with the first draft of the report, and I would say the final draft to some degree, is that, it was all done by committees. So there are 100 priorities. It's like, no, there aren't 100 priorities. That's a contradiction in terms. It's like you start with one of these things, and maybe you start with a small piece of it and see if it works. But it's to have 100 priorities is to make no one dissatisfied. But you're not going to move, because you can't move in 100 directions at the same time. Yeah. So it's a real abdication of, and people do that in a sneaky way too, because they're abdicating their responsibility, right? Say, well, we're going to move in 100 directions, and everyone had input. It's like, well, that's not the issue. The issue is how you condense that down to an actual action plan. And that actually makes you accountable. That's the thing, and that's why people don't do it. It's like, well, if you're going 100 directions, then it's hard to see whether you're doing it well. But if you're going in one direction and that doesn't work, it's like, well, that's pretty obvious. Yeah. So people are afraid to do that, but if you don't do it, it's failure.
Yeah. I get the same thing where I get people now, they ask me a question and I give them the answer and they say, I knew you were going to say that.
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah, I'm one of those people, by the way.
Yeah, he does that from time to time.
Yep.